Hello everybody, my name is Billy, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make an email processor using Azure Functions. If you don't know what Azure Functions is, make sure you check out my Getting Started with Azure Functions, where I kind of just explain how to set up your environment and what Azure Functions is. So today we're going to be building a web application using .NET Core, so we're using ASP.NET. We're going to have an Azure Storage Queue right here. We're going to have an Azure Functions, and then we're going to have an HTTP client code that's going to send an email out. And what we're going to need to build first is a web app. We're going to create a project for a Azure Functions, and then we're going to kind of build a little library right here, a library class that's going to have a reference to both of these two. And what that reference class is going to do is handle this interaction right here, the in-between, where you will need to kind of serialize your message from .NET Core going in and deserialize from your Azure Functions going out. And on the web application side of things, what we're going to build is a simple contact us form that exists on every website. And then we're going to have that send off the contact name and the email address. Let's start by creating our project. So I'm going to go here, create a new project, and I'm going to start by creating the web application. So I'm going to choose Core, and I'm going to find web app right here. So I'm just going to give this a regular name. So I'm going to call this Awesome Shop. And my web app, I'm going to call my web app the web app. And the solution, I'm just going to call it Awesome Shop. I'm going to create that. And then I'm going to create two more projects. I'm going to create one reference library, just real quick, MVC. I'm going to create two more projects. I'm going to create a reference library, and this library, like I said, will be used in between these to kind of handle the deserializing and serializing of the messages. And then I'm going to create my Azure Functions. So let's go here and let's go to search Azure Functions. Okay, and then you get that. And then same thing, I'm going to call it Awesome Shop. And I'm just going to call it Azure Functions. If you set up your Azure Functions kind of as a one-time use, you can call it, for example, in this case, it'll be my email processor functions. So you can call it that, but I usually use my Azure Functions as a kind of multi-purpose one. So I'm going to have multiple Azure Functions kind of services within one Azure Functions project. So that's why I'm calling mine Azure Functions. So click OK. And I'm going to be using a queue trigger. And I'm also going to be using Azure Functions version 2. And if you choose empty, you can always just search up the different templates later. I'm going to choose that. And then I'm going to add my reference library. So add project. And I'm going to do a .NET Core library because both of these are in .NET Core. You can use Net Standard if you would like. Awesome Shop. And since this is going to be my Azure Queue deserializing message library, I'm going to call this my Azure library. Give it a name like that. So let's go build our contact form. I'm going to close everything here, and we're going to open our web application, and I'm just going to copy the contact us page. And what it is just the contact name, the email address, and a button, and then success message after it's good. Let's go back to the home controller, and let's add a view bag message. And it's going to start off empty because you don't want a message at the beginning, but you want it afterwards when it's successful. So let's say thank you for, let's say thank you, we've received your message. And let's add a little smiley face just for the hell of it. And the contact us is going to send us this contact name. And it's going to send us the email address. And this is all just very simple Razor stuff. And we'll make this a post. And let's add the route to our layout view. I'm going to change this and replace this with contact us. And that's the ASP action. And here's the contact us. Let's start this. And we will kind of just see really quick our view. Okay, let me just shrink this down so you guys can kind of see it a bit better. Okay, and we hit our route. And this is our contact form. let's stop this application. And I'm just going to put in comments here really quick what the contact form is going to do. We're going to send thank you email to contact. Send new contact email to admin. Okay, so that's basically what we're going to have here. We're going to build out the library now, and then we'll come back to this. Let's just close all this and open the diagram. So we're going to need to build 3 things. The first thing is going to be a method for ASP.NET Core to send a message to the Azure queue. Since Azure Functions already has a way to dequeue, we're going to first need to be able to send it through this way. And then the second thing we're going to need is a way to serialize so that the common way for it to understand is the same on both ends. So serialize and then deserialize. And then we're going to need the message itself. So that blob payload of the email we want to send will get wrapped up in here. And we just have a common object to serialize into it. Let's close this down and go to our queue library. I'm going to close this. And we're going to need 2 dependencies first. So we're going to go to NuGet and we're going to go here. And the first one is going to be windows.azure.storage. This will give us kind of the SDK to use the queue client. We're going to install that. Accept. And then the second one we're going to need is Microsoft.extensions.dependency injection, because we are going to inject in our services that we create here into the web app and into Azure Functions. All that. Accept. Close that down. And let's go here and create some folders. So this one's going to be infrastructure for the dependency injection registries. And we're going to call this next one the queue connection. And here we're going to just create a very simple class to do our registries. So dependency injection registry. And it's going to be very simple. And if you are curious about how dependency injection works, you can check out my dependency injection static video, which I will explain everything. And I will also explain how to use the singleton, scoped, and transient lifecycle. So add Azure queue library, this iService provider, good, and then we return services here, and we return service. Perfect. So now we got this going. Let's go create our client factory. So we create a new class, and I'm going to call this my cloud queue client factory. Okay. Let's public, and we're going to need an interface. So public interface. And we're going to return a cloud queue client. So cloud queue client. And this is all very specific implementation to get started on Azure Queue. Resolve that namespace. And you can find their kind of getting started on the Azure documentation as well, if you're curious. So create a constructor. So what the Cloud Queue client is going to need is it's going to need the connection string to the Cloud Queue. So, and this could be your local, or this could be a real one up in Azure. So what we need to do is we need to get our configurations. So let's create a queue config, because we're going to need a hard-coded queue config, because I like to inject in strongly typed. So string, and then queue connection string. Okay. And then we're going to do this one. And this is just going to take in a string of queue connection string. Save that. All right. So this is the first thing we're going to be registering in our dependency. Oops, sorry, static. And this is just going to expect a string of queue connection string. and we're going to register our first dependency. We're going to say add singleton, and then we're going to say new, and this is going to be expecting a queue connection. But we'll resolve that namespace. Perfect. Oh, sorry, this is supposed to be iService collection. Sorry about that. All that service is. And then we'll take our queue config and we will be injecting that right here. Okay, we resolve the namespace, inject that in, private read only. And to make sure that this is allowed access to it, we take our factory, go to here, register this as a singleton. Okay, because it's very important that you have this as a singleton since this is a reusable client. Oh, sorry, I haven't really even made it yet. So private cloud queue client. This is a reusable client, and you'll want to not new it up every time, or you'll go through socket exhaustion. So let's say if cloud queue client not equal to null. So it already existed because previously you accessed it. We want to just return it. And if it doesn't exist yet, we're going to create one. So we're going to create a storage account first. Cloud storage account. Resolve that namespace. Remember, this is where Azure.storage came in. Oops, resolve the namespace. And then we're going to parse our connection string. And we're going to take the queue config and we're going to get the queue config. Okay, once you have a storage account, you then can create your cloud client. Take our storage account, and we're going to create a cloud queue client now. And we're just going to then return the cloud queue client. Let's go ahead and create our communicator. And what the communicator's job is going to be is use the queue client to communicator is going to use the queue client to send a message to the queue, Azure queue, and is going to also serialize and deserialize our message. So it's going to set up everything, interface. So communicator is going to be able to read a message of type T. And it's going to be able to send a message of type T. And we're just going to do this. All this namespace. And let's go make our serializer now. So I'm going to create a new folder. Call it message serializer. And we're going to create an interface called iMessage Serializer. And the one message type we're going to have is a Json Serializer. So we're going to go JSON message serializer. We're going to use the Newtonsoft, obviously, to do so. So let's create here, make this a public interface. And same thing with this is going to be able to do is deserialize of string message. The reason why I'm doing splitting it out is just to kind of encapsulate things a bit more. So you can have a series of different deserializers and serialize. So for example, if you want to switch it from the JSON message serializer to like a protobuf serializer because you want to have a higher performance, you can do so very easily. We're going to have that, and we're going to take this here, implement that. and do that in there. Now let's just do the very simple, our object equals JSON convert dot the serialize object, and we're going to say object of type T, and we're going to say message, and we're going to just return the object. We're going to do the opposite here. We're going to say we want our message, and we want the JSON convert serialize object to just serialize it into JSON for us, right? And we're just going to return that message. Realize there's probably a typo over here about the J. Let's go to register our serializer services. Add. Let's add this as a singleton as well, since it doesn't really need to change. Message serializer. And we'll resolve that. And sorry, this is JSON message serializer. And then we will also register our communicator at this moment. Services.add transient. And the reason why you want to add it as transient is because when the Azure Functions uses it, it won't know what a scoped is. It will know what transient is. And because we want to kind of have this reused by different things, and we can just simply dispose of it, we can then have it as a transient versus a singleton. Let's go create our messages that we're going to send in our communicator before we go back and tie it all together. So we're going to send a message, and Azure Queue has a route name that we have to specify when we're sending it to. So I will show you all that when we actually start sending the message. So we'll just call this base queue message. And the Visual Studio Explorer, Storage Explorer is actually quite good for visualizing what's going to be happening later. So we're going to need a route, like I said, and the route is going to pass in the constructor. And because we don't want anyone to be able to make an instance of this, let's just make this an abstract. So let's make the message we want to send to the queue storage. So send email command, because we're going to be telling from the ASP.NET Core side of it, it's going to be sending a send email command. And that's basically telling the Azure Functions, hey, I want to send an email. That's why it is a command. Base queue message, all that. And now we're going to need the route. And the route is going to be important to set as a kind of constant, because Azure Queue is going to need the same route name as well. And if we just reference it in one place, it'll kind of keep it nice and neat. So I'm just going to call it route names, give it a generic name. And then I'm going to go public constant string, and this is going to be for the email, so it's going to be an email box. And then the Azure Queue naming is lowercase, and you can have dashes, but you can't have uppercases. So just keep that in mind. And then route names, resolve the namespace, and have that email box. So the ASP.NET Core wants to tell Azure Functions to send an email, and it needs to know who the email is going to. It needs to know the subject of the email, and it will also need to know the body of the email. Tighten that up a bit. Now we have all the pieces together. Let's go to our communicator and put it all together. And let's inject in the various things we've made. So let's go iMessage Serializer. And let's have that as a private read-only. And let's also take our Cloud Queue factory. So iCloud Queue factory. And put that as a read-only as well. Let's go to our diagram and kind of piece it all together now. So we've now created our message, right? The blob that we're going to be sending from the .NET Core side of things, which is our send email command. And then we're going to then serialize that with our JSON message serializer and send it across the wire using our Cloud Queue client factory back over here to Azure Functions, where it can then dequeue it and use the serializer once again, the JSON message serializer, and then it will grab the send email command object, and then from the send email command object, it will know the to, the subject, and the body of the email. Let's start off by adding the generic type to our message sending. So this is the base queue message that we had earlier, and this will just give us access to the route. I'm going to do that down here, and I'm going to make this async. The first thing you want to do is grab the reference to the queue, and in this case the reference is going to be the mail-box. We're going to grab that from the Cloud Queue client that we made. We're going to grab our client, and then we're going to get the reference, and that reference is going to be to the route. Right? And that is, like I said, once again, the email box. So once we get a reference, we're going to then create the queue if it doesn't exist. So we're going to go await queue reference dot create if not exists. So it'll create the mailbox for us if it doesn't exist. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to serialize the object coming in. Then we're going to set it as a Cloud Queue message, and we're going to send that off. So serialized message. And then we're going to use our message serializer so we don't have any decorated JSON in here. And then we're going to have the queue message, and this is just a object that is a part of the SDK, Cloud Queue message. Okay, and then we're going to send our serialized message. Okay. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to use the queue reference that we got. So queue reference, and then we're going to add message async. So, and we're going to add the queue message. And we're going to tighten that up a bit. And so we created our client queue. We created a reference to that. We have a way to create it if it doesn't exist. Then we're going to serialize our object that we had, and then we're going to send that object off. So basically everything that's described over here in this diagram where we object serialize send is now right here. So the deserialize is going to be very simple since we don't have to handle on the Azure Function side of things. We don't have to handle the communication. Azure Functions will dequeue for us. So it's going to be very simple where we have message serializer, deserialize of type T, and then we're just going to return that back. Let's go to our web app now, and we'll add the library that we made as a reference. And we're going to set up the dependency injection. And we're very close to being able to kind of have a working demo for you. So let's go Azure Queue library. And it all makes a lot more sense once we kind of piece it together. So we add that, and it expects a queue connection string. So from our configuration, so new, we're going to have a connection string. So let's go add our connection string. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go to my notes, and I'm just going to copy and paste our connection string. And use develop storage equal true will let you use your local emulator, which I will show you in 1 second. Go here again, sorry, copy the name, and in our startup, we'll paste that there. And let's go to our controller. Close all of these, open our home controller, and we're going to inject in our service. So the service we're going to inject in is the communicator. IQ communicator. Resolve the namespace and have it as a private read-only. And what we're going to do now is what we said earlier here. We're going to basically send a few messages to the queue. So var, we'll have our thank you email. So we'll thank you email, was new send email command. We'll resolve that namespace. And then what we're going to do is we're going to include the to, which is going to be the person who sent us a contact. And then we're going to have a subject, and that subject is just going to be thank you for reaching out. I guess the subject, so we don't need a period. And then the body of it is we will contact you shortly. And once you have your message, what we want to do is we're going to use the queue communicator. And this will now have to be a sync task. Right, so we have the communicator, and the communicator is going to send a sync. We're going to send a send email command. All right, and we'll do the same thing. Oops, sorry. And thank you email command. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take this and we're going to send a email message to our admin. So let's say we have admin@test.com, and this is just the admin message. Yeah, admin@test.com, and we will tell the admin we have a new contact. And we will use string interpolation here to write a message to our admin. We will say contact name has reached out via contact form. Please respond back at, and then we'll have the contact's email address. Right, and we will send that once again through the communicator. So now I'm gonna close all of these. Let's actually send off our email now. So I'm going to run this application. I'm also going to put a debugger right here. And then I'm going to open the Azure Storage Explorer. If you don't know what that is, check out one of my very first videos I've made, Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer. This will let you create a local emulator, so you don't have to do your development with a real queue yet until you're done. And this is the queue, so emulator queues. You can see right now I don't have any queues. And we're going to drag over the contact form. I'm going to drag that over right here. And we're going to go to contact us. And as soon as we send an email or go through the send email command, one of the steps is to create our email box. So let's do that. Send test@test.com. We'll submit that and make sure our message is correct. Yep. And we'll step through. And right now here we are going to create our queue client factory. We're going to get the client, and then we're going to get the reference to mailbox. So let's do that. And then the create if not exist, we'll create our mailbox queue. Let's do that and refresh this. So now we have our mailbox queue, and that mailbox queue is empty. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to serialize our object to JSON with our Json Serializer. Perfect. And then we're going to create a cloud queue message. And then the final thing we're going to do is we're going to send off that serialized message to the queue. So let's go here, and now we should have a single message. And there's our message. So same thing, we're going to send the admin a notification email that the contact has contacted us. Do the same thing, send it off, and then double check our queue that we have now 2 messages. Perfect. And then we'll change our message on the website, and there you go. Thank you, we've received your message. Okay, and that's going to be the end of part 1. I know we haven't really gone to the Azure Function side of things yet, but now you can kind of see that there is a lot of setup work that you're going to have to do depending on the type of trigger you're going to be making. This is one of those triggers that you have to set up a lot of the work so that when you scale your application, it's going to be much more clean later. So the next video, we're going to be creating the Azure Functions dequeuer side of things. But like I said, since we've created the library to deserialize and do all that stuff, it's going to be a lot easier when we get to the next part. Thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. If you learned something, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more future videos. And I'll see you guys next time.